He's ready to come at you. I'm Terry Sullivan. This is Dave Drason. You know, Dave, we were talking about what to do this week on Bigtime Memories. We've done managers. We've done all sorts of singles wrestlers. We've done the lady wrestlers.
Yep.
Talked about the different referees in big-time wrestling. And we came up with this one. Tag teams.
A very integral part to any wrestling show.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't think you can have a wrestling show without a tag team bout.
Yeah.
You know, and let's, delve into the guys who were the tag teams in the Big Time Memories years.
Yeah, and we go way back now into the 60s, as a matter of fact. Normally we don't go back that far, but just to give you an idea of the names that appeared here in tag team combinations, it's just astonishing.
Yeah, but not just, the throw together, when you had like the tag team champions going against, and they put a couple guys together.
Yeah.
But we're talking about guys who that was their specialty, tag team wrestling.
Yep.
So let's focus on that.
Good, the established teams.
Yep. And let's talk about the teams that precede big time wrestling days, because in the 50s through to 1965 at the Olympia Stadium and in the early Cobo Arena days, there was some great tag teams.
Yeah.
So let's touch on them
in the surrounding areas as well, throughout
Right.
Ohio, all over around Michigan.
Yeah, we had guys like the Shires.
The Shire brothers, Roy and Ray. Now, there's an interesting one to start with. Roy Shire, known as the Professor, went on to promote very successfully in San Francisco and
Yep.
Northern California for probably 20 years. And Ray Shire became Ray Stevens.
Right.
One of the best technical wrestlers of all time. And Ray Stevens was one of the biggest stars ever for Roy Shire in San Francisco. It was Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson as a tag team combination, and then Ray as a singles wrestler also.
Right, and he made a big name for himself in the AWA territory.
That's
with
right,
Nick
yeah.
Bockwinkel, and then he ended up going to the WWF. So Ray Stevens, and even though I've only seen matches of his on television or tape, everybody and even wrestlers themselves say he was like one of the top 10
Yeah.
technical wrestlers of all
Yeah.
time.
So many of them say they fashioned their own in-ring performance on Ray Stevens.
Yeah, and then we had the Gallagher brothers.
Doc and Mike Gallagher, yeah, from upstate New York. Quite a rough and tumble tag team combination of the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, and then we had the Brunetti brothers.
Guy and Joe, right?
Yes.
It was Joe Brunetti and Guy
Brunetti,
and
but Joe
Tangero.
Joe Tangero, right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Which I always used to, whenever I'd visit St. Louis, after
that's
the
right,
Keel
yeah.
shows, I always went to Joe Tangero's restaurant for dinner.
And right away we've hit off two brother teams. That's a big theme in wrestling, is put a couple of guys together and call them brothers. There were some legit brother combinations, which we'll talk about.
The Stanleys.
Yeah. We have Steve and Bob, and then there was another Stanley who was
Gene.
not a brother.
Gene Stanley.
It was Gene and Steve who were brothers, and then Bob was
Exactly.
yeah.
There
Bob,
we go.
They called him a Stanley.
What about the Tolis brothers?
Oh,
Chris
yeah,
and John
right.
Tolis.
From Hamilton, Ontario. Yeah, they were a huge as a tag team combination in Detroit, Toronto, throughout the area. And then sometime in the, 60s, John took off,
Right.
never to return.
Nope, not here. And then we had the Bastines.
Yeah, Red Bastine and Lou Bastine. Lou Bastine, later known, perhaps better known around here as the fabulous Lou Klein. They started with the chest of silver dollars.
Right. They had a big chest of silver dollars that they'd bring into the ring, and they'd, take a handful and throw them out to the crowd.
Wow.
Not many, I'm sure, don't want to empty that whole chest because, and I don't know if the chest, which was probably this high, we have a picture of that. But I don't think it was full all with silver dollars, because that had to be.
You sure they weren't chocolate silver dollars? Brothers?
Well, I don't know about that either.
Is that what caused the breakup of the Bastine brothers?
Well, let me say this. Whenever I was I'll say the first times that I was with Red Bastine at Cauliflower Alley Club, I told him I was from Detroit and stuff, and he, acknowledged, great, yeah, I had a great time there and stuff. And I says, yeah, and you were teaming with Lou Klein. And it's like, oh, that's son of SOB. Boy, I caught myself there. Red Bastine hated Lou, and probably with good reason. A lot of his trainees hated him. Lou Klein, was a nickel and dimer and a schemer, and any, way that he can get squeeze a nickel out of you, he'd find a way. But those were some of the, guys that, were at the Olympia Stadium in early days of the Doyle Barnett promotion.
It doesn't surprise me that a lot of them had animosity because they literally traveled with each other. They probably were together most days because there was so much traveling in cars back at that time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they probably got on each other's nerves.
So when the Sheik bought Big Time Wrestling, in 1965, the very first tag team champions were Chris and John Tolis.
Oh, okay.
I don't recall, and I can't find any pictures of mine with them with any kind of championship belts at all. So maybe they were just, called the tag team champions back then.
Yeah.
And then, then we had the Miller brothers.
Legit brothers, Bill and Dan from Fremont, Ohio. There was a third Miller brother who wasn't really a brother. That was Ed. Before Danny started, for some reason, Bill or somebody came up with the idea to give Bill a tag team partner. Mm-hmm. They got another. Bill was 6'6", legit. Ed Albers was same height. 6'6". Yeah. So they put these two huge guys together, and they were really successful. Then Danny came in 1957, thereabouts, and Ed sort of eased himself out of it. But they're legitimately from Fremont. We haven't talked about Dr. Bill Miller or Danny for that much, but Bill Miller was huge star all around the country, from California to Minnesota to New York City, to that territory, to here in this area. He was legitimately a veterinarian for the state of Ohio. He was a meat inspector for the State Department of Agriculture. That was his day job.
Yeah, and wrestling was his night job.
Yeah.
But he had other, since we're on the Miller brothers right now, Dr. Bill also wore a mask.
Yeah, he was the Dr. X.
Dr. X for a while.
In Minnesota. Wasn't it in Minnesota?
Yep. And then, in Minnesota, he was Mr. M.
There you go.
Yeah, in St. Louis and in that territory. Dr. X was the destroyer, Dick Beyer.
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah. And then, great tag team there. And then, one of the fun ones that appeared at Cobo Arena in, 65, 66, the Scufflin' Hillbillies.
Yeah. Chuck Conley and Rip Collins. They were from Southern Ohio. They were mainstays on the circuit throughout the state of Ohio and into Michigan. They even appeared in Madison Square Garden several times. They were like a touring attraction. They were sort of like a Haystack Calhoun, where it was like, oh my God, what are we seeing here? A couple of hillbillies coming into the ring with their jugs. Shine. Yeah. In fact, they even had a second version of the hillbillies. Cousin Willie and Cousin Slim, Billy Garrett and Marvin Cheatham, managed by Cousin Alfred. And sometimes at some point in time, the four guys interchanged with each other at some point.
Great gimmick, great idea.
Scufflin' Hillbillies. They wore the overalls and the hat and the gun, and it was like cast off from the Beverly Hillbillies.
Yeah. And then in my early years of attending, Cobo Arena, boy, this tag team scared the living bejesus out of me.
You and me both.
They were huge. The Mighty Yankees.
Yeah. They were in for a while. They were based out of Toronto, working for Tunney. In fact, in Toronto, they named them the Masked Yankees were Doodle and Dandy. But when they were here, they were just Masked Yankees number 1 and number 2. Moose Evans and Bob Stanley, one of the Stanley brothers, were under the mask. But they were a great tag team combination in the mid '60s.
Yeah.
And you know, the Sheik and I were riding home from a town one night, and you know, I happened to mention to him how impressed I was with the Masked Yankees, and I thought they were such a great team. And I said, "Who were they?" And he laughed and says, "I don't even remember them."
Wow. I remember them.
Yeah,
they scared me to death. And then the second tag team champions to appear in Big Time Wrestling, and never had belts either that I can remember, because I can't find any, photos of mine with them, but I have pictures of them. They were great. Magnificent Maurice and Johnny Barron.
Yeah. Absolutely. They were fabulous tag team combination. Wrestled everywhere.
Yeah.
Coast to coast, Madison Square Garden, main events most of the time. And occasionally their manager was Armstrong K, sometimes known as Mr. Clean, better known as Abdullah Farouk, Ernie Roth, the Weasel.
Yeah. Oh, what a great team they were.
Yeah.
And then I want to bring up a few teams here that they had managers, but they were tag team. They were also tag teams.
Yeah.
So when
the manager and the wrestler.
Right.
Yeah.
You had the student, George Steele, who had Gary Hart, and sometimes they would tag team.
Uh-huh.
You had the Beast. And Martino Angelo,
right,
who was the promoter in Toledo, Ohio.
Yeah.
You had the Kentucky Butcher, Big John Quinn, and Big Bad John.
Remember Big Bad John?
Oh.
He's going to put the whammy on you, lady.
Oh, yeah, the whammy. And the one, promo that I always love about Big Bad John, he'd be talking to Lord Layton. He goes, "Yeah, in 2 weeks when I'm going to be, appearing at the Kobe Arena." The Kobe Arena. I always still say that to this day.
Big Bad John initially had one of the worst platinum blonde dye jobs you've ever seen. It's like, dude, go buy another bottle of that stuff. You really need it.
But he was entertaining.
Yeah, he
and
was.
Then,
Good interview.
You also had Igor and Ivan.
Oh, yeah.
They were like, peas and carrots, peanut butter and jelly.
Absolutely,
they were always seen together and, great as a team. But, everybody remembers Igor as a singles,
with
Ivan Kalmakoff as his
was
manager.
in his later days in the ring at that time. Yeah.
And then I think this would have been around 1967. You had the Negro tag team of Bobo Brazil and Sailor Art Thomas, as they beat Maurice and Baran to become the third tag team champions for Big Time Wrestling.
Art Thomas had the physique, the bodybuilder physique, which was pretty unusual at that point in time. Yeah, he was great. And Bobo, of course, just as the epitome of tremendous.
And then you had the fourth tag team champions, Boris and Nikolai Volkov.
Yeah. Nikolai Volkov, not the Nikolai Volkov who wrestled with the Iron Sheik for New York, for WWE, but Boris and Nikolai were a couple of short guys. Yep. They played the whole Russian thing, but they were a good little tag team.
Oh, they were a great tag team.
Yeah.
And that would be the first incarnation as tag team champions that had any kind of representation of champions. They didn't have belts. Remember, they had that big trophy with the globe on the top.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, I always said when I first became a manager and working for our UWA, when I was managing the Destroyers, we didn't have tag team belts.
Oh.
We had a darn trophy that was 4 foot tall.
And you got to lug it around.
I had to lug that bugger around every show.
Yeah, a lot of the promotions, the trophies predated the championship belts. Yeah.
That, or they had jackets.
Oh, yeah?
Some promotions had jackets.
Like suit jackets?
No, more
Ring
like
jackets?
breaker, windbreaker kind of thing, or
really going all out.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then, the next tag team champions that beat Boris and Nikolai, you had Lou and Roy Klein.
Ooh, yeah. Roy was Lou's supposed nephew.
Yeah.
Really wasn't.
No.
His name was Roy McGowan. And I tried to find out whatever happened to him after he left Detroit, because he wasn't here that long. He became one of the Bass brothers in the Memphis area and lasted about 5 years in the business and was gone.
Yeah. they were, they weren't around long at all as a tag team here.
No.
But then another tag team that happened, this is pre-Kangaroos that we know them as, Al Costello and Don Kent. But, you had Roy Heffernan, and Al Costello as the original Kangaroos. But when Al Costello came in here, he formed a tag team with Karl von Bronner.
Oh, yeah.
As the Internationals.
That was an excellent tag team combination, managed by Gary Hart.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And they beat Roy and Lou Klein to become the tag team champions. And then the team that beat them was Fred Curry and Billy Red Lyons.
Red Lyons, just to me, one of the most underrated wrestlers ever. He was just great.
Yeah, and then, right after that, soon after, the tag team that beat Fred and Billy Red was the Fabulous Kangaroos.
Newly reformed with
Al Costello and Don Kent. And they won the tag team championship, multiple times in the area, taking on everybody.
Right.
And then you get into, probably the tag team that had the most impact on me. Oh, I just love these guys. Ronnie and Paul Dupree, the Hells Angels.
Man, they were so hated. The people would get so hot at them. I saw more than one riot in Toledo when I was a kid involving the Hells Angels. They were the bleach blonde motorcycle gang kind of gimmick, and nasty and ruthless in the ring and good on interviews.
Oh, great on interviews.
Boy, just the epitome of bad guys.
Yeah, and the fans just couldn't wait to see them get defeated.
Right, yeah.
And they finally saw a tag team that was put together that finally beat the Hells Angels, and that was Rocky Johnson and Ben Justice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were a great tag team. You talk about Dropkick season.
Yeah.
Woo!
We talked on one of the other shows about one of the best matches I ever saw in my younger days was the match they actually put on TV in the day when they didn't put main events on TV at all. But they did with this one for some reason. The Hells Angels against Rocky Johnson and Ben Justice. Mm-hmm. Just extraordinary action.
Yeah, and they were tag team champions for a while. And then a new tag team came in, new hated heel tag team. You had the Skull Brothers.
Oh, yeah. A couple of bald guys, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was John Medencia.
John who later became Psycho,
Yep.
JB Psycho.
Yep. And his partner, Ray Elmore.
Yeah. Cowboy Parker, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In later years. And then probably another tag team. Once the Hells Angels left the territory, when these guys came in, oh, I just loved them from day one. They were a tag team that came in peace and left their opponents in pieces. That was the Love Brothers.
Hartford and Reginald.
Yeah.
Did they ever have the titles? I don't think they did.
They never had the titles.
Honestly, I don't think they used the Love Brothers well here. I was watching Detroit TV and Cleveland TV, and they were over like $1 million in Cleveland, and they had championships there. Mm-hmm. But they never really did that much with them in Detroit.
No, but they had some great matches and a lot of heat here.
Sure, yeah. Tremendous workers.
Great guys. And, it wasn't, that many years later that I got to manage Hartford Love.
Yeah, that's right. Sure.
Probably one of the most exciting times in my life.
Yeah.
And then to close out the 1960s, you had a new tag team of the Stomper and Ben Justice.
The end of the 60s, right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they were a very popular tag team. I mean, the Stomper, Guy Mitchell, finally, got his chance to be, shine here. Mm-hmm. And Ben Justice, when he teamed with him, was already unmasked at the time.
Yeah.
Jerry May or Jerry Mayberg, as everybody else knew him. But the Stomper and Justice, they fought the Fabulous Kangaroos so many times. It seems like every other Kobo show, once a month, it was, the Kangaroos versus Stomper and Justice.
And every time it was the best match on the card by far.
Easily. And then we got into the 1970s, to start the 70s. Oh, another tag team that I just loved, and I became friends with them at a very young age. And, I love them too. The Outlaws.
Oh, yeah, the Texas Outlaws, sure. Dusty and Dickie.
Yep, Dirty Dick Murdoch and Dusty Rhodes.
And this was the first push that Dusty Rhodes had, and it was right here in the area. When he first came to Detroit, he was enhancement talent. He wasn't winning, he was losing on TV.
But he was Dusty Runnels then.
Yep, you're right. His real name.
Right.
Isn't that his real name?
Right,
Yeah, Runnels. But then he was reinvented as Dusty Rhodes, and back with Dickie as the Texas Outlaws. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Team.
And then the team that beat them, and even though they didn't tag team a lot, they, we couldn't say that they were a tag team per se like the Outlaws or the Hells Angels and, Stomper and Justice. But they put together Bobo Brazil and Lord Layton.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and they beat the Outlaws, and they held the tag team championship for a while.
For a while, yeah. But then the championships were vacated. This was back in December 1970.
Right.
The Sheik injured Lord Layton. I think he went to Australia to recover. And so the belts were essentially vacant until for another year when the Kangaroos beat Justice and Stomper in a tournament.
Right. And then another tag team that I loved, it didn't last that long, but two good friends of mine, Dewey Robertson and Murray Cummings.
Was Murray under the mask then?
No. This is when he was unmasked. And under the mask, he was...
Flash Gordon.
Flash Gordon, exactly.
Yeah, Flash Gordon, there's an original.
Yeah. And then then you had the hated Japanese tag team of Mitsu Arakawa and Yoshino Sato.
Oh, all the Japanese teams were hated. They had to be bad guys, back then. But yeah, Arakawa, just a classic guy. Yoshino Sato, just starting his career. And back at that time, Inoki or Giant Baba in Japan, when they had a new, young, aspiring star, they would send him to the United States and put him in a territory and let him gain experience, and they would come back to Japan, and it was obvious that they had been working every single night because they were just an all new person. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was a tag team that reinvented themselves. I guess they got tired of shaving their heads.
Okay.
The Skull Brothers.
All right, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, because you had John Medency and Ray Elmore let their hair grow out, and they became the Wrecking Crew.
Who would have figured? Who would ever thought the Skull Brothers had hair?
Yeah, they were, and they were just as mean and nasty as they were as the Skull Brothers.
They were a good tag team colors.
Yeah,
I liked them best as the Skulls, though.
Yeah, I would say that was their top, And, as the Wrecking Crew, they didn't last that long, maybe 6-8 months because, John became, JB Psycho.
Yep.
And then, probably the biggest tag team of all, and I'm not talking about popularity and I'm not talking about championships, I'm talking about weight. The twins, the McGuire twins.
Benny and Billy. Real name was McCreary.
McCreary, right.
They used the names McGuire. Fabulous. Each of them weighed 600 pounds. It was real. They both had tremendous attitudes, though, always up and positive. But, God, I don't know how they even made it to the ring.
Well, they would come in on scooters. Remember they had the mini bikes?
Yeah,
they would always come to the ring because if they, especially at Cobo, if they had to come from the dressing room and come through the hallway and, up the steps, they'd be, out of breath.
Or think about Toledo, all the way from...
Oh, the back, yeah.
But they both got in the ring.
Right.
Because they couldn't tag out.
Yeah, you tag and get through the ropes, oh my God, you get stuck.
Once they got in, that was where they were staying.
Yeah, one would stay in the corner and the other would come and tag. And
they were nice guys, but they were, again, one of the traveling attractions.
Right.
They would come in for several weeks to a territory, then go on to the next one, a lot like Andre the Giant did later in his career.
Exactly.
And Haystacks.
Yeah. But, whenever there was a match against the McGuires, and like you said, they were fabulous guys, nice outside the ring,
Yeah.
And then, of all things, did you know this, that they married twin sisters?
No.
Yes.
Let me guess, twin sisters who weighed probably 100 pounds each.
Exactly. They were
How did I know
tiny
that?
gals, and really, good-looking gals.
Yeah.
I don't know the attraction, but maybe the dowry, maybe
We're professional wrestlers.
maybe their dowry, they got
Yeah.
paid by the pound. And then, oh God, another classic tag team who became champions. Bill Terry, who was an enhancement talent for years around here, and a newcomer that came in with him, Kurt Von Hess and Karl Von Schatz.
Oh, they were great. They held the titles for
numerous
at least a couple
times.
of years.
Yeah.
Great tag team combination, though. Excellent.
Yeah. Well, because you also had the excellence in their corner, too, the manager,
I am right.
George Cannon.
Yeah.
Oh, he managed them to the hilt. Oh, God, they were so good. So hated, too, everywhere.
Yeah, and this was back in the days when, in order to be a German professional wrestler, you had to have bald head.
Bald head and, do the strut and the Heil Hitler kind of thing, and
Like
they
Hans
did
Schmidt,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in touch with John Anson on Karl Von Schatz on Facebook.
I am, too.
Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talk, chit-chat, on Facebook all the time.
I had to put up a current picture of him because you sure wouldn't think it was Karl Von Schatz that we remember.
No, not at all. And he's a good-looking guy.
Yeah.
With hair, he's a good-looking guy.
Yeah.
Well, just imagine if you and I had hair these days, how good-looking we'd be.
Yeah, keep imagining.
And then the tag team that came along to beat Von Hess and Von Schatz for the title. Do you remember this one? Louis Martinez, comes on, promo and says, I'm going to have a mystery partner that we're going to, try to get the titles off the, Von Hess and Von Schatz, those dirty Germans.
Yes.
And when it came time for the match, Louis Martinez comes out, and there was this other guy that came out, and he had like a bed sheet over, his whole body, and he had like a little string around the neck to, try to keep it in place.
It's really high budget
Yes.
time wrestling, yeah.
And it ended up, during the match, that the masked guy or the disguise guy started, giving drop kick after drop kick after drop kick to Karl Von Schatz, and they won the title. And then who could it be? Louis Martinez's partner that did all the drop kicks. Flying Fred Curry, of course.
Yeah, he'd been gone for quite a while.
Right.
Yeah.
Great team.
Yeah.
And then the team that came right after them to take the championship from him, just after, he turned heel and teamed up with, one of the notorious nasty guys, the cigar-smoking, stinky elbow guy, that dirty Killer Brooks.
I don't know if his elbow was stinky. That elbow pad was
The pad was stinky.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. Yeah, Killer Brooks and Ben Justice.
Yeah.
What a team they were.
They were excellent.
And like you said, and another segment that, Ben Justice, when he was a good guy under the mask, and even when he was unmasked, when you would do promos with him, he was like sort of wasn't able to get his view across to get fans to put, their butts in the seats.
He was boring.
He was boring.
Yeah.
But when he became Dirty Ben Justice or
God.
Beautiful Ben Justice.
He blossomed.
Yeah. And then his promos, him and
Solid
Brooks,
gold.
oh God, they were
Yes,
gold.
sir. Yeah.
And then a team came in that I remember it would have been the 60s that they formed a tag team in the East Coast, and they were feared. My God, were they feared. And they were champs there. And then they came into the big time wrestling, the Mongols.
Sure. Yeah. Tatry Newton.
Newt Tatry.
And at that time, the other Mongol, his partner was Bill Eadie, right?
Right.
Bolo. Bill Eadie went on to become the masked superstar and went on to great, great things around the world.
Well, first it was Beppo and Guido.
Oh, Nikolai, right?
Right,
That was
Nikolai Volkov was the original Mongol, and then
in
Bill
New
Eadie.
York.
Right, and
But then here it was Bill
Eadie.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then new tag team champions came along to take on Brooks and Justice, and that was Flying Fred Curry and Tony Marino.
Oh, there you go. That was a great tag team.
Yeah, they can go.
Pretty much anybody you put with Fred Curry, anytime you've got Fred Curry with anybody, it's going to be golden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, once I left, tag teams that came in, first tag team that came in were the Poffos.
Angelo and Lanny, father and son. Angelo did main events in Detroit back in the 50s. Now here he is in the mid-70s again with his son now as tag team champion again.
Mm-hmm. And his other son also came in, Randy.
Yeah, that's right.
But he was working singles until they put him with Mike Thomas. And they became known as...
What was it, the Patriots? No.
No, the Mod Squad.
That's right.
Yeah, they were the Mod Squad.
That's right.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, so Mike Thomas and Randy Poffo.
And Mike at one point was under the mask as the Patriot.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And then came back after many, many years. You know, they were a heated tag team here, mainly at Olympia Stadium in the late 50s, early 60s. The Alaskans, Mike and Jay York.
Right. Yeah, great combination.
Yeah, boy, you talk about being able to wrestle.
Yeah.
You know, and Mickey Doyle, he'll attest that. Because they were good friends, and he's went against them many times when they were working out together in California, out in the LA territory, and they were good friends. And you know, he would always tell me how what a great worker they both were. And then you had the first incarnation of the Islanders that came in. Wasn't that?
It was Alpha and Sika.
Right.
They were pretty much brand new. They were out of San Francisco, the Bay Area, and Samoan wrestlers. They became the Samoans later on, but here, when they started, they were Alpha and Sika, the Islanders, and at some point they were managed by Gentleman Saul Weingeroff.
Right. And then you had another combination that came in, the Bounty Hunters.
Yeah, I remember Dave Novak, and I don't remember who was the other one.
I can't remember.
Uh-oh.
Jerry Novak, wasn't it?
Okay, Jerry Novak and David.
Things that pop into your head, while doing this segment.
Right.
And then, of course, late in the 70s, you had Terry and Dory Funk came in.
Oh, it was hard to top them. Just solid gold as a tag team combination.
Oh,
really? Yeah.
I always saw Dory Funk in St. Louis, when he would take on like Harley Race or Jack Briscoe, and those were just like technical matches that had fans at the edge of their seats, even though both were like considered good guys or baby faces. But the maneuvers that Dory Funk could do were just amazing.
And long matches too.
Yeah,
right?
And then you had Terry Funk, and it's like he was really coming into his own at this time. He was just a crazy dude, and he could do it all too.
Yep.
Crazy bumps and just everything. But as a tag team, the Funks were just amazing here.
Of course, their matches with against Abdullah the Butcher and the Sheik from Japan, classics.
Yep.
And they recreated that rivalry here in Detroit.
Bloodbaths.
Yeah.
And then you had, tell me about these two guys, Rick and John Davidson.
Well, a couple of really nice guys. They were tag team champions for a while, legitimate brothers. That was during the decline. There was really little, if any, money at that point in time. And I know they were living in Toledo. They were almost destitute because they just weren't making any money. And they went on to California and did okay out there for Mike LaBelle near the end of the LA promotion. But a couple of really nice guys, but not the caliber of those we've mentioned so far.
Yeah. And then the big tag team tournament, maybe they tag teamed in Japan more than they did here because they only appeared here once, but we have to give them kudos because they won the tag team tournament.
Right.
That was the Giant Baba and Jumbo Tsuruta.
Right. They beat John Bonello and Randy Scott.
Right.
That's another team that had the championship for a while. A couple of really good guys, smaller than most of the other teams we've mentioned. But Baba and Chiruta won the tag team tournament, won the World Tag Team Championships, and the Sheik got a real nice payoff for the Giant Baba, who brought in the Japanese Nippon TV, his Japanese television crew and announcers, and filmed at least the Japanese part of the tournament, and they went back to Japan with brand new tag team championships.
And this is a piece of, info that probably, has been lost on Big Time Wrestling.
Yeah.
But they were the last what we would say tag team champions in big time wrestling.
Yeah.
There was, none other because the promotion, ended in 1980.
Yep. The Sheik and Brooks were in that tournament as a
Right.
tag team combination.
That's who they lost to.
Well, they had a
Bob.
bye. They had a bye first, then they were disqualified the second time around, so they were out of the tournament. So the finals was the Japanese against Bonello and Scott for the belts.
But we also have to talk about Bruiser's promotion,
Right,
when he came in rival. And there's only really 2 tag teams that I can come up with that, really stood as tag team workers in his promotion. And boy, you talk about a tag team that was, worldwide and known and mean, nasty, and had the greatest manager of all time, Bobby Heenan, but you had Blackjack Lanza and Blackjack Mulligan.
Incredible team.
Right.
Yeah, very successful in cities around the country for years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you also had the only other tag team that I could think of in his promotion would have been when he brought in the Crusher. The Crusher and the Bruiser.
That was a guaranteed draw.
Yeah. The old ladies love them.
Yep.
They'd be doing the polkas and, drinking their beer and
do the polka with the dollies.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
And then let me bring up a few oddities. They weren't really tag teams per se.
Yeah.
But they tag teamed maybe once, maybe twice in the territory. First, when you had the Sheik babyface turn, when Sheik and Bobo teamed. Who would have ever thought? Going back into the 50s, you had the Sheik versus Bobo, which, even to this day is one of the most heated rivalries and probably fought against each other more than any other 2 wrestlers in history.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other 2.
I try to forget it.
Yeah. And then you had, the Sheik teaming up with Dick the Bruiser.
I try to forget that too.
They were rough and tumble, and it was guaranteed excitement. Blood and excitement, and punching and kicking and everything else. When those 2 teamed up, and then maybe one of the oddest ones of all for me, you had George Cannon that ended up teaming up with the captain Ed George.
Yeah. Did they win the titles?
I don't know, think they won the titles, but I remember George Cannon telling me that was the lowest point in his wrestling career when he had the team with him.
Well, when Captain Ed teamed up with Lou Klein retired.
Yeah.
They won the titles and Louis retired.
There you go. You want to retire in the wrestling business? Just team up with the captain.
You talk about oddities. How about the Sheik and his partners? He had partners over the years. Carl Cox, Bull Curry, everybody he was partners with, he ended up
going against.
Yeah, he'd turn on them, and every single time, all these big bad guys of professional wrestling, they'd turn against the Sheik, and they became the good guys.
Yeah.
The Sheik was always the villain. The fans always sided with the Sheik, whether it was Firpo, Bull Curry, Bill Miller, Dick Brower, Ox Baker. But never Brooks. The Sheik and Brooks never wrestled.
No.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen that
Yeah.
one. That would have been, wow.
Yeah.
That would have been a heck of a match to see.
The thing was, they would have turned Brooks into a good guy.
Yeah.
More or less.
So, those are all the tag teams that, I can think of that appeared, here in Big Time Wrestling, for the Sheik's promotion and, Dick the Bruiser's promotion, and even before in Barnett and Doyle, into the late 50s, early 60s. But of all these teams that we talked about today, let me ask you, name your top 3 favorites.
My top 3. That's really tough. I had to write it down, but I would have to say, all things considered, without going into a whole big, long discourse, my number 1 tag team combination of all time is the Fabulous Kangaroos.
Okay. Legitimate.
What's yours?
Well, you got 2 more. I'm
Okay.
giving you top 3.
Second, Hell's Angels.
Okay.
And third, Rocky Johnson and Ben Justice.
Can't go wrong with those 3 at all. My top 3, definitely Hell's Angels number 1.
Yeah?
I love the Hell's Angels. Chris Colt and Ronnie Dupree.
Yeah.
You know, they befriended me as a young kid. And I'll never forget that. And, you know, were very nice to me.
Yeah.
And even when Chris Colt went off on his own, you know, there was a chance. And when I was at working for George Cannon's Superstars of Wrestling up in Canada, he wanted to put me together with Chris Colt as his manager, because at that time Chris Colt had this rock and roll thing going, crazy thing, and I dressed in the crazy rock and roll, you know, outfits and stuff like that, and George wanted to put us two together.
Yeah.
Thought that would work great.
Sounds like a good idea.
Chris didn't like it.
Really?
You know, and, you know, I understand his reasoning. You know, he wanted to do his thing on his own. You know, he didn't want a manager taking any, you know, limelight away from him and, you know, doing talking for him, because he was good enough on his own on the mic.
So he said, I'm a solo act.
Yeah, so I never got to manage, you know, Chris. But Hell's Angels would be my #1 tag team. #2 would have to be the Love Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Hartford and Reginald.
I wouldn't argue with
My
that.
God, they were so entertaining and nice guys, too, you know.
Yeah.
And great workers. You know.
Oh, absolutely.
And then #3, another, you know, couple guys who came into the territory when they were very young, and I met them, and they really took a shining to this young fan, and I became friends with them, and that would have to be the Texas Outlaws.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
Dick Murdoch and Dusty Rhodes.
Did you ever party with the Outlaws?
Yeah, you know, the thing, you know, about the Outlaws is that I saw Dusty in, you know, a few different territories and stuff. But, you know, like I said, they befriended me here. And then I went to St. Louis, you know, to visit, you know, as I usually did when I was a young kid. And Dick Murdoch was there. And, you know, like on a, you know, especially on a spot show, you know, first. And he saw me, he's like, what are you doing in St. Louis? You know, I'm visiting friends and stuff. And we got to talking, you know, prior to his bout. Then the very next day, he's on the Keel show, and I'm, you know, the ringside photographer for Sam Muchnick up there, and Murdoch's looking at me like, what? Where'd you come from?
Yeah.
And he's posing in the ring for me and stuff.
Yeah.
And then it was maybe 6-8 months later, me and Don Wilson took a drive to Kansas City, you know, for Gus Karras promotion over there, and Dick Murdoch was there. And, you know, he comes out of the dressing room and sees me. He says, what are you doing here? And I'm only like a 13-year-old kid. And I come prepared at that time with my pen and paper and questions. And I got to interview Dick Murdoch, which that interview and my story appeared in Wrestling Review magazine.
Excellent.
So those would be, you know, my top 3.
Yeah.
So,
can't argue.
And, you know, this, I call this segment, we had fun with this one again.
Yeah.
You know, hopefully, you know, the wrestling fans and Bigtime Memories followers enjoyed our tag team segment, and they learned something.
Lots of fun.
And as usual, Terry, we go out with you introducing guys. And since it's a tag team, how about you doing a final ring announce for the Texas Outlaws?
I can do that, but you know, you were too young to party with the Texas Outlaws, so was I. But Bob Finnegan, I remember, ended up in a dumpster in Cleveland after partying with them. That's a true story. But anyway, I digress. Introducing, ladies and gentlemen, from Waxahachie, Texas, at a combined weight of 575 pounds, Dirty Dusty Rhodes and Captain Redknack.
Captain Redneck. Captain Redneck.
Redneck.
Come on, wake up here,
Redneck.
Terrence.
Edit. And Captain Redneck, Dick Murdoch.
Captain Redneck.
Redneck.
Sounds like a Red Bull. Where were you drinking this morning?
I wish. Another one for the blooper reel.
I'm really proud to say that I'm a part of IBW.
I take pride in IBW that we are a family-run company.
It's a fight. It's a sport. At IBW, tradition has always mattered.
You're going to see world-class professional big-time wrestling at its best.
This ain't no sports entertainment. This is professional wrestling.
International Big Time Wrestling's The Fix. Each and every week, your fix of IBW action. You want entertainment? Look no further than Rocks TV. International Big Time Wrestling!
Wrestling fans, if you like what you've seen, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also don't forget to ring that bell.